Today we're joined by John Galan, who is one of the only artists to have been a resident at Main Street Arts twice. So John was a resident for the first time in September and October of 2016, and then he came back for a second residency July of 2018. So John, thank you for talking with us today. And can you just remind everyone what you were working on during your residencies at Main Street Arts?
Yes, of course. Hi, everyone. John here. Thanks for the introduction, Bradley and Sarah. So back in 2016, when I was at Main Street Arts, it was my first time actually witnessing autumn, right? I'm from Southern California, outside of Los Angeles, and I never have really experienced autumn. So that was one of the main reasons I kind of wanted to visit Main Street Arts, was to get away from big cities, go to a place where you could really see the countryside and the beauty of upstate New York. So visiting Clifton Springs was absolutely amazing, getting to know the people, getting to paint everything around me. So I loved getting to witness seeing the transition, like the beginnings of autumn into full autumn. And then like the day I left, I think it started snowing that first day. So that was like perfect timing on my part because I cannot deal with snow for, I don't know, more than 3 hours, right? Californians, they go to the snow for the day and play, and then we run away back home. While I was there in 2016, besides falling in love with the nature, I did lots of plein air painting, so I painted outdoors. But then I really took the time to think about what I wanted to focus my artwork on. And that was the first time I really created an artwork that was meaningful in my life, in the sense that I wasn't just painting all over the place. I kind of had a focus, and that focus was kind of to embrace my own cultural background. So like, does it mean to create Chicano art, and what is Chicano art nowadays in 2016 at that time? And for me, it was quite interesting, because it was a different time in 2016 because everyone was talking about it. It was the election year, what was going to happen. And it ended up being that Trump won or whatever. But that also kind of like stuck in my head that whole time, hearing all those things. And I wanted to create an artwork that kind of talked about the relationship between Mexico and the US, and how toxic that relationship can be. And not to point fingers or anything. It was kind of just like this circle of life of like good and bad, the relationship between the two countries, and what that meant to be as a Mexican American, like living in this world in the US in 2016 during that election. Mm-hmm. So the work I created, my final piece, was this giant, I think it was 36 by 54 inches. I created these 5 portraits that also, besides talking about all those issues on political issues, I also kind of wanted to celebrate my roots. So that's what that painting is also about. It's a combination of celebrating my roots and then kind of laying out the realities of politics within the two countries, North and South. So part of that portrait was like the center figure was an ode to Frida Kahlo's painting, The Wounded Deer. So the center figure had this like deer body. And then the portrait, half of it was of Frida and the other half was my face, a self-portrait. And I kind of wanted to talk about just like how I admire her. I've always was inspired by her work. And I've always seen myself someone as like, if I had a spirit animal, it might be some type of like elk or deer or something like that. And I've painted myself that way in the past. And so it just seemed like quite fitting for me to do that when I had painted it at the time. And then the other characters in the painting, one of them was a Day of the Dead dancer, because I wanted to celebrate music and dancing, those types of arts within Mexico and that culture, defining the culture. I also included a famous singer from Mexico who's one of my favorite Mexican singers who's passed away, but his name is Pedro Infante. He has like a star on Hollywood Walk of Fame because he made lots of movies with Hollywood and big name. And so I also wanted to celebrate music in that way, besides just celebrating the visual arts. And then the last two figures, one was a luchador, wearing a luchador mask, which is like WWA. And so the luchador, the whole purpose of that, I made the mask to look like half of it was to look like the colors of the Mexican flag, and the other half was to represent the colors of the U.S. flag. And the whole purpose of that was to start to talk about those issues between the relationships of Mexico and the U.S. and how at the time I had seen a video about a gentleman named Dr. Morales, and he was the last figure in my painting. So the painting was about celebrating my favorite things about Mexico. I had imagery from like bead making to my favorite type of ceramic pottery, from Mata Ortiz designs and the artwork. Then the other part was talking about more political issues within that. And I think it all kind of stemmed from just the 2016 election, just from what I had saw about the story of Dr. Morales. And it was definitely one of my first works that made me think deeply about the content I wanted to create. And since 2016, Chicano art or art representing any type of Latino cultural background has kind of been my main influence since then.
I mean, I wasn't working at the gallery at the time that you made that painting. Like, I wasn't there during your first residency as an employee. So I didn't necessarily know like all of the background about that work. So like, I find that really interesting because I'm very familiar with that work. I've seen, I saw it in person when I visited the gallery at that time, and I've seen it in photographs and stuff. So like it's very recognizable to me, and I can picture each of the portraits that you're talking about as you go through it. But like I didn't necessarily know all of the history behind it. So like I think that's really fascinating.
Thank you. Yeah, it was originally the original drawing. I don't know if I still have the sketch. When I do my sketches, they're really horrible, but the original sketch was much bigger. And it was I think it was the second time I've worked large. And that was partly because Bradley encouraged me, which I'm really thankful he did. Otherwise, I would have never created that work. But Bradley took me to the supply store in, what's the city? I'm already forgetting. Rochester. Yeah. He took me into Rochester and he was like, "Oh, look at this big one. Make a big one." Oh.
Yeah, and that was like you had just met me like an hour before that.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm glad he did though, because then it forced me to really think about working bigger, and I'm so glad I did because it's one of my favorite pieces. So in July 2018, I got to go back to Main Street Arts Gallery, and I was so excited. I did a lot of plein air painting while I was out there, but I kind of wanted to continue investigating and pushing for Chicano art and, defining like, who am I, all that jazz. And by 2018, I kind of had a more solidified idea that Chicano art is definitely what I want to do. There's no doubt about that. So I came back to Main Street Arts, ate lots of pizza. Discovered they have yummy chicken wings at Nima's, right? Oh my God, those were so good.
I don't know that I've ever had them from there.
Oh my God, they're like,
yeah,
they like drench them in butter. It's like really not good for you, but like so good for your soul. 2018 was good. Like I said, I did lots of plein air painting. I got to drive around the area, really experience the Finger Lakes, which I absolutely loved. I would definitely move out there. Like I love Seneca and Canandaigua. You might see me there one day, you guys. You never know.
Hey, you're welcome to live here for sure.
If you come up here, we better see you.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
I'd be pretty mad if we didn't see you and you came out here.
That's right.
No, I agree. I ended up painting on a canvas that was circular. And the first time I did that was in 2017, back in at a residency in Australia. which I don't know why I did, because it was like really hard shipping it home. I think it cost me like $200 to ship it home from Australia. It was crazy. So never doing that again. And then when I came to Main Street Arts Gallery, I was like, this has to be cheaper living in the US to ship a painting home. And I think it only cost me like $30. So way different when you're living back home in the US. And so the painting I created was a self-portrait, and I tend to do lots of self-portraits because I like to paint stories in my life, and the way I do that is kind of in embracing my Chicano culture. I not only want to connect to what it means to be Chicano, but also connect to like my Mexican roots and how I can depict stories of my life now using imagery, pulling imagery from Mesoamerican designs and ideas. So part of that painting, I'm wearing this headdress of Tlaloc, which is the god of rain. In Aztec culture, there's usually some sort of sacrifice that takes place in order to pray to the gods and like receive from the gods. And so in that painting, you see me wearing like the headdress that's dedicated to the god of rain, and then I'm offering like a heart to a deer, which is supposed to be the god in an animal form kind of sense. So I wanted to kind of, usually you hear in stories like gods come into the human world as like different forms, and to seem more natural. So that's kind of like the story of that painting. And the whole idea was I was in a bad place in my life, and I wanted to kind of see what it was like to pray. So I grew up Catholic, and I was like, I'm going to throw that out the door for a second and see what it might be like to create a painting where I'm alluding to like Aztec times in polytheism, where there's multiple gods that you pray to. So it was kind of just a reflection on alluding to those from a current situation that I was living in my life. And so that was what the whole painting was about. Falling Water, I decided to name it that because the whole background landscape scene for that painting is of Watkins Glen, which is near the residency. And so I went to Watkins Glen maybe 2 or 3 times to do some plein air studies to really kind of get the light in the area at that time of year, which was so different in July than it is in September and October. Yeah, so the lighting was so different, but still so beautiful. And so the whole landscape behind me is Watkins Glen, which is this if you guys don't know what a glen is, because people in California don't know what a glen is, it's like a canyon thing. So like this deep canyon with water running through it. It's about a mile long, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
And let's see. So thinking about post-residency, what have you been doing since your last time at Main Street Arts?
I decided to go back to school in the fall of 2018 to get my teaching credential. So I was attending classes twice a week at night. I decided to take it slow. I was taking night classes. I had 2 twice a week. And then during the day, I was working full-time for a nonprofit organization called Art Trek, and I've been with them since 2017. So they're a big part of my life, and they've always, encouraged me to travel and do residencies during summertime. One, because it's slightly slower, not so much anymore. We've gotten really busy, but yeah, they've always just been great supporters of me in my art career. And so, and that was teaching basically primary school visual art education. So at that company, most of the time of the year that I was working was going to different primary schools within Los Angeles and Ventura counties, teaching art classes all day, and then doing it again the next day at a different school. So that kept me very busy, on my toes. It gave me lots of teaching experience, and I realized like this is something I can do. I actually like to do it, and so that's when I started to go back for my credential. And then I was working again during the day, teaching during the day. And then in 2019, in June 2019, I attended an artist residency at Tiapapata Art Center. It's a crazy spelling, I'm not even trying. In Samoa. So the country of Samoa, if you don't know, is between Hawaii and New Zealand. But the island was so beautiful, and getting to know the people and the culture was absolutely wonderful. And what I really loved about Tiapapata was they basically gave me a grant to live there as long as I taught. So kind of the reason why I went was to teach and kind of practice teaching on my own for a month. And so I got the opportunity to be housed there they had a tiny little house. It was literally like those, tiny homes. It was one of those. It was really cool. 2-story, but like bottom story was one room that they turned into 2 somehow. And the top story was just like the bed. Samoa is great because I got to continue developing my work, which was such a blessing. And the work I had created there, I ended up, like I said, I love to paint memories of my life. And so one of those, I had this photo of my mother and a photo of my sister when they were younger. So I ended up creating 2 paintings out there. The first one I finished of my mom when she was probably about 18, 19 years old. So really young, but I just loved the painting, and I wanted to kind of tell a story about her using imagery with like alluding to her immigration story. So in the painting, she has these monarch wings to represent migration north, and that's kind of the tell story of the monarch butterfly. They hibernate in Mexico during the winter because it's warm, and then they fly north. All the symbolic imagery of putting the butterfly wings on her was kind of an ode to her journey traveling north and being able to start a new life where she could raise her children without having to worry about famine or stuff like that. So, and then she's holding like a tuna, or she's holding a cactus pear. In Spanish, we call them tuna. I think I wanted to paint my mom because she had told me a story right before I left for Samoa, a really sad story about like her growing up. And because of that painting, I was actually contacted by the curator of the Hollywood Cemeteries Day of the Dead Festival. And so I ended up calling the curator. He ended up coming to see my artwork, and that was after I came back from Samoa. And that was like that was probably my biggest exhibition I've ever had. It was a group exhibition. And it was like an amazing time in my life. I did not expect any of it to happen. So I got invited to do the group show. I got to have 10 paintings in the show. One of them was the one of my mom. The other one was of my sister. I wanted to paint someone who was like this strong figure in my life, not only as a mom, but as like a role model, because my older sister's like 14 years older than me. So she's always been someone that I've looked up to and modeled after. And so I painted her, and I had 10 paintings at this show. And it wasn't even a show. It was like the Day of the Dead Festival. It was the largest Day of the Dead Festival in the country. And there was 55,000 plus people there. And I ran out of business cards in like the first hour. So that was an absolutely incredible opportunity for me to be able to show my artwork at the Hollywood Forever's Day of the Dead Festival. And then right after that, Art Trek, the company I work for, had asked me if I would like to create a Conejo Cottontail, which is basically the Conejo Cottontail project is where you are given this giant 5'6" fiberglass rabbit that's all white, and they ask you to paint it. And then the 20th one, so there's 20 rabbits in the Conejo Valley region where I live. It was kind of one of my dreams to be able to create public artwork for my own community. So essentially all the rabbits are bought by organizations within the community that display them out on their property within Conejo Valley, and the money is given back to the community. So it's given back to our programs at Art Trek, where we use the money for at-risk youth, senior programs, art programs for seniors. It was supposed to be unveiled in March, and it didn't happen because of everything that went on, but that's okay, right? Life happens. Not a big deal. And I got to paint that rabbit. It took me 6 months because I was in school, and had I not been in school, it would have taken me like a month, less than that, because I'm a pretty fast painter when it comes to, like, if I have the time and I'm not doing 101 things at the same time, then I can, you know, pump stuff out pretty quickly. So I had probably finished half the rabbit in the first 2 weeks I started, and then school started, and I was like, okay, freeze, like I'm gonna have to wait for a while. So that's what happened with the rabbit. I finished it, and it was probably the most meaningful rabbit, I think, not only for me, but for the community. And the community doesn't even know about it yet, but because the Thousand Oaks Hotel, who commissioned me to paint it, wanted me to incorporate the history of Conejo Valley. So unlike all the other rabbits that didn't really have, like, the artist could do whatever they want, the hotel asked me specifically to create a history of our community. And so it was the first time I got to learn about stuff where we used to have a zoo way back when. And in that zoo, there was Leo the lion, Leo the lion ended up being the symbol for MGM, you know, the movie.
Yeah.
And all that. So there's great history, lots of Western films shot in our area back then. And it was just a really cool experience to learn about the area. And personally for me, being, you know, coming from indigenous backgrounds from Mexico, right, being Native American, like Aztec and Purepecha from my dad's side, I felt it would be wrong not to represent the Native American community in our region. And so a big part of creating this rabbit imagery was like wanting to paint a Chumash Native American or on the front of the rabbit. And so there was kind of a lot of hesitation at the beginning because it was not addressed when they gave me the criteria for what I needed to incorporate. Mm-hmm. And so I was like, I'm not going to listen because I'm an artist. And so I included all the criteria, but I was like, I'm going to slap a giant, you know, brown person on the front because they were here first and this area wouldn't be here without them, you know, in the sense that they developed it and they're a big part of the community still. So I kind of wanted to do a little ode to them as well. And I had to get permission from them and make sure like I wasn't culturally appropriating because I just wanted to make sure that I was doing everyone justice in the community, essentially. So that rabbit was awesome. In November, on the Day of the Dead, at the Day of the Dead festival, that was on Saturday, November 1st, and November 2nd is the actual Day of the Dead. On Sunday, I ended up getting to be at 2 different festivals, so I forgot to mention that. Yeah,
well, I was going to ask you about that because I thought I remember that from your Instagram around that time that there were like 2 things happening within, you know,
yeah,
more time.
Yeah. Well, so both festivals happened Saturday and Sunday, and so I was like, I'll just go to the big one Saturday. And then the second one the second festival was at Pacoima City Hall. And so I got to have some artworks at Pacoima City Hall, and I got to meet representative there for the city. So that was absolutely incredible. And since then, because of, I think, the whole Day of the Dead thing, it's just brought me so much like great vibes and good luck in my life that I got to do Day of the Dead. I got to paint the rabbit. Got to do 2 Day of the Deads and show at, you know, a city hall, which is a big deal for me too. Mm-hmm. And then because of that, Pasadena City Hall wanted me to show some artwork in a group show. So then I got to do that. And then right now I currently have artwork at Santa Clarita City Hall. So it's been exciting just to be able to be part of exhibitions that are starting to become more meaningful for me. In January, I had applied for the Coachella Valley, like Trashed Coachella competition. And I had this concept idea, which I had been working on for about a year. And it was about, I have the trash can with me right here. It was about, I've created this imagery that I wanted to represent Chicano culture, and how could I do that using iconic forms that could, that all people could identify to, because it was a level of, yes, I want to celebrate Chicano culture, but then I also want to celebrate like humanity and the human experience and what it means to be human. And so the whole series that I started last year that kind of helped kind of grow everything for me was my my triptych of my cactus lungs, my pomegranate heart, and then my cornbread. Yeah, those kind of were like the beginnings of the magic that started happening in my life last year. And so because of those, I wanted to use those three symbols again, the lungs, the heart, and the brain, in my proposal for the Trashed Coachella. So I had applied for this in January thinking like, whatever, I'm not going to get it. And then like I finished my rabbit in February, freaking out because it was so stressful that I had to finish, because it was supposed to be unveiled. And I was in school teaching full time, getting accepted to paint this trash can. And I was like, oh my God, what did I get myself into? And I think the reason why I applied for the trash can and I told myself I was going to do it, everyone was like, don't do it if it's stressing you out. And I told myself, like, I can't say no anymore. And it's kind of crazy how life throws things at you, opportunities at you. It's so easy to say no. And sometimes you have to learn how to say no, for your soul. But last year, there was a show that's now on Netflix that had reached out to me and asked me if I wanted to have some work in the show as like background props in an art gallery on the show. And I said yes at the beginning, but then they didn't want to pay me. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of had trouble with that, and I decided it wasn't worth my time. But I kind of regret it now because I could have, been on a Netflix show. And if you've ever seen or heard of Gentified, it's spelled Gentified, Gentified.
I don't know that I know it, but
okay, it came out like a couple of months ago.
Okay.
But I'm really excited because even though I wasn't, selected to do it, they had also reached out to my friend who lives like 20 minutes away. She's kind of like the iconic person in our community who has really represented what Chicano culture is. And so she's like the main artist for the artist on the show. Because I think because of the whole Netflix thing, I was like, I'm never going to say no again. And so I've been saying yes to everything. And it's been like driving me crazy because I've had to like work through all this while I'm teaching full time. So it was so much work for me that I was feeling very overwhelmed trying to do it all. The Coachella thing, same thing. I was super overwhelmed, but I knew I needed to get it done. And I did get it done, and it is done. And I actually came out with new imagery for it too. So the back of the trash can is of like kidneys, but I made them cherries. Mm-hmm. So they're cherry kidneys. And then it's really hard to see, but that leads to like a fig bladder.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
And then the top of my trash can, this is upside down. It's upside down. But essentially this is a liver.
Okay.
It's a fruit that is called mamey, and it's popular in Mexico and surrounding South American countries. And so I made it in the shape of a liver. And then I made this little green thing, a cross section of a lime, because you can't have lime. You can't go anywhere in Mexico or in LA without touching Mexican food if there's no limes, right? So I made this lime gallbladder. And then I made this stomach that has 2 chilies because we all know you can't go anywhere without chili either. So hard to see, but because it's upside down. But yeah, that would be the stomach. the liver to the stomach, and then kidneys to bladder. And then I kind of improved my corn grain. I made it much brighter. And then I've got my pomegranate heart on the front, which works well because there's like a hole in here.
Yeah.
And then I've got my lungs on the side.
That's great. And so this, I mean, the whole situation now has changed things for Coachella, right? Is that not happening?
Yeah, so Coachella, they've postponed Coachella to October this year, and that's where we're at right now.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's going to happen or not. If it doesn't, maybe next year they'll let me paint another one, or maybe they'll feature this in next year's.
I would hope the work's done. You know, I mean.
Yeah, the work is done.
Right.
What's great about the Trashed Coachella recycling bins is that, yes, they get to be featured at Coachella, which is awesome and a blessing. But what's even cooler is that they're donated to public schools afterwards. And so they go to public schools, and it's this artwork on this recycling bin that encourages children to learn how to recycle, right? So that's the whole purpose of the recycling bin. And it's in association with Global Inheritance and Trash Coachella. So Global Inheritance is a nonprofit that does all these projects that encourage recycling, conserving, preserving, all that stuff. So it's been a great blessing being able to work with them and having the opportunity to get to work with them.
Oh, that's great. And so if Coachella is going to be potentially in October, is there a new date for the unveiling of the rabbit?
The rabbit, I was told there might be a small unveiling of just us. So we'll see.
Yeah,
I'd like it for it to be bigger. You know, like I spent a lot of time. I want people there. But that's okay if it isn't. I get it. That's life. You know, you can't always get what you want.
I've loved following your Instagram and seeing like the different parts of the rabbit, like as you've been working on it. It's just been really fun to watch the progress on it.
Thank you. Yeah, I believe. I was actually accepted to an artist residency in Mexico this year.
Oh, wow.
Which has been a dream of mine, on like the largest lake in Mexico. And now I don't know if I'm going. So that was kind of like the biggest heartbreak I've had. Because I know they'll start to lift the ban on stuff because it's just like inevitable. I mean, I don't think it's a wise thing. I don't think they should. So I'll probably postpone it.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was one of the ones that I really wanted. I've been wanting to go to Mexico for a really long time, especially because that's kind of like what my focus is. So I've really wanted to be immersed in the culture. So yeah, that was kind of like, that's sad. But then like, I thought about it for a while and I was like, what's the pro out of this if I'm not traveling, going anywhere? And I was like, you know what? I'm going to have my own residency here at home, right? I have my own studio already. Like I've got a huge easel. The easel's right there. It's a big one. I've got Pikachu in the corner.
Yeah, I was gonna say something about that earlier. Yeah.
Yeah. So my nieces, because they're doing distant learning now, and I teach at home online. They come over and I help them. So when they have free time, I let them paint. Yeah. So
Great.
Still teaching kids.
Yeah.
Excellent. A little bit. And yeah, so I'll be able to do my own residency at home over the summer. And I think that'll either be very productive or very unproductive. But honestly, I think it'll be very productive because I can get stuff done pretty quickly when I have the actual time to do it. So.
Well, this has been really great.
Yeah.
You've been doing a lot.
You've been doing a lot. But it's just really nice to like sit down and have a conversation and like really hear about like everything that you've been working on and, you know, like hear you talk about your work and everything. So.
All right. Well,
okay.
Goodbye, John.
Bye, you guys. It was good to see you.
Great to see you.
Nice to see you.
All right.
Bye.
See you later.